The thunder shook the wagon's wooden frame, vibrating through Hannah Foster's bones as she urged her exhausted horses forward through the deluge. What had begun as a promising journey west to Bozeman, Montana, had quickly descended into a desperate struggle against nature's wrath, a decision she now bitterly regretted making alone. Hannah clutched the reins tighter, her knuckles white with strain as rain lashed her face. At 22, she'd been told countless times that a woman had no business traveling without a husband or father to guide her, but stubbornness had driven her forward after her parents' death left her with nothing but a deed to land in Montana territory and a wagon full of possessions. "Come on," she shouted over the storm to her team of horses. The animals snorted in protest, struggling through mud that grew deeper by the minute. The normally dry creek bed she'd chosen to cross had transformed into a roaring torrent in mere minutes, the spring flash flood catching her completely unprepared. The wagon lurched violently as a wheel struck a submerged rock. Hannah felt the sickening crack before she heard it, the rear axle giving way beneath the strain. Water rushed around her ankles as the wagon tilted precariously, the current pushing against its side with increasing force. No, no, no. She abandoned the driver's bench, splashing into knee-deep water that was rising at an alarming rate. The horses whinnied in terror, the wagon's weight now dragging them backward toward the deepening channel. Hannah frantically worked to free them from their harnesses. If she couldn't save the wagon, she could at least spare the animals. Her fingers, numb from cold, fumbled with wet leather straps as water climbed past her knees to her thighs. A massive surge lifted the wagon, tipping it further. Hannah screamed as her footing gave way, the powerful current sweeping her legs out from under her. She clutched desperately at the wagon's side, but her wet hands slipped from the wood. In an instant, she was pulled into the churning water. The world became a chaotic blur of brown and gray as the flood carried her downstream. Hannah fought to keep her head above water, gasping for breath when she could, swallowing muddy water when she couldn't. Her heavy skirts dragged her down, and exhaustion rapidly claimed what little strength remained in her limbs. "Help!" She managed to cry out once before another wave pushed her under. Through water-blurred eyes, Hannah caught a glimpse of movement on the bank, a rider on horseback keeping pace with the current. She reached out a hand in desperate hope as the rider spurred his mount forward. The man she could see now. It was a man uncoiled a rope from his saddle. With practiced precision, he swung the lariat above his head and cast it toward her. The loop sailed through the air, and with her last reserves of strength, Hannah reached for it. The rope fell perfectly around her shoulders. She clutched it with both hands as the cowboy instantly began backing his horse away from the bank, pulling her toward safety. The current fought to keep her, but the powerful horse and the skilled hands of its rider proved stronger. Hannah felt herself being dragged through the shallows, then onto muddy ground. She collapsed on the bank, coughing up water, every muscle in her body trembling with exhaustion and cold. A shadow fell over her as the cowboy dismounted. She looked up through strands of soaked hair to see a tall figure silhouetted against the stormy sky. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice was deep, tinged with concern. "Are you hurt?" Hannah tried to answer, but another coughing fit overtook her. The man knelt beside her, gently helping her to sit up. "My wagon," she finally managed to gasp. "My horses. Your horses broke free, saw them running up on higher ground." He pulled off his slicker and wrapped it around her shoulders. "The wagon's gone, I'm afraid. River's taking everything today." As her vision cleared, Hannah got her first good look at her rescuer. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with rain-darkened sandy hair beneath a battered hat and the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. His face was tanned and weathered from outdoor life, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." The cowboy touched the brim of his hat. "Samuel Blackburn, madam. Most folks call me Sam." He glanced at the raging waters, then back at her. "This ain't no place to rest. My ranch is about 2 miles from here. Can you ride?" Hannah nodded weakly. "Hannah Foster. And yes, I can ride." Sam helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "We need to move quick. This valley's going to flood worse before it gets better." Before Hannah could respond, he'd lifted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness. He swung up behind her, one arm secure around her waist as he turned the animal away from the flooding creek. As they rode through the driving rain, Hannah leaned back against the solid warmth of the cowboy's chest. Her entire future had just been swept away by the flood, yet somehow, pressed against this stranger who'd risked his life to save hers, she felt safer than she had in months. She had no way of knowing then that the loss of her wagon would be the beginning, not the end of her journey. The rain continued its assault as Sam guided his horse up a winding trail toward higher ground. Hannah, still wrapped in his slicker, shivered against him. The adrenaline that had kept her fighting against the floodwaters was fading, leaving her drained and increasingly aware of the stinging scrapes on her arms and legs. "Not much further," Sam assured her, his breath warm against her ear. "House is just beyond that ridge." Hannah nodded, lacking the energy for words. Through half-closed eyes, she watched the landscape transform as they climbed. The flooded valley fell away behind them, revealing a vast expanse of Montana prairie stretching to the distant mountains. Under different circumstances, she might have found the view breathtaking. Now, she could focus only on remaining conscious, on ignoring the throbbing pain in her ribs where she'd struck something in the water. The horse crested the ridge, and Hannah saw a modest ranch spread out before them. A sturdy 2-story house built of logs and stone, a large barn and several outbuildings, all surrounded by split-rail fencing. A few cattle huddled beneath a shelter in a nearby pasture, seeking refuge from the downpour. "Home," Sam said simply. He guided his horse to the covered porch and dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help Hannah down. Her legs buckled as her feet touched the ground, and Sam caught her, lifting her easily into his arms. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "No need." He carried her to the door, which he opened with a practiced kick. "Mrs. Wilkins," he called out as he entered the house. "Need some help here." A plump, gray-haired woman hurried from the back of the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of them. "Land sakes, Samuel Blackburn, what have you brought home now?" Despite her alarmed expression, her voice held warmth. "Found her in the creek, Mrs. Wilkins. Wagon broke apart in the flood. She needs dry clothes and probably the doctor." The housekeeper sprang into action immediately. "Take her to the guest room upstairs. I'll heat water and find some clean clothes." Hannah tried to protest. "Please, I don't want to be a burden." "Hush now, Mrs. Wilkins said firmly. "No one turns away folk in need, especially not in weather like this." She bustled off toward what Hannah assumed was the kitchen. Sam carried her up a narrow staircase to a small but comfortable bedroom furnished with a brass bed, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. He set her down gently on a patchwork quilt. "Mrs. Wilkins will help you get cleaned up. I'll ride for Doc Harper if you think you need him." Hannah assessed her injuries mentally. "I don't think that's necessary. Nothing seems broken, just bruised and scraped." Sam studied her face, seemingly unconvinced. "You sure? That was a mighty bad tumble you took, I'm sure." In truth, Hannah wasn't certain, but the thought of causing more trouble for this man who had already done so much made her reluctant to ask for more. "All right, then. But you tell Mrs. Wilkins, if you change your mind." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Where were you headed before the flood caught you?" "Bozeman," Hannah replied. "I inherited some land there from my parents." A fresh wave of distress washed over her. "All my papers were in the wagon, the deed, everything." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "We'll figure something out. Rest now. We'll talk more when you're feeling stronger." After he left, Mrs. Wilkins arrived with hot water, towels, and a flannel nightgown. She helped Hannah remove her sodden clothing and bathe her scrapes with surprisingly gentle hands for someone so brisk in manner. "Mr. Blackburn's a good man," the housekeeper commented, as she applied salve to a particularly nasty cut on Hannah's arm. "Best rancher in these parts, even if he is young for it. Took over when his pa died 3 years back." Hannah winced as the salve stung. "He saved my life." Mrs. Wilkins nodded approvingly. "Not surprised. That boy's always had more courage than sense, riding out in a storm like this typical Sam." She helped Hannah into the nightgown. "Now I've got stew on the stove. Think you can manage some food?" The mention of food awakened Hannah's hunger. "Yes, thank you. I'll bring a tray up, then you sleep. Doctor or no, what you need most is rest." Left alone, Hannah eased herself beneath the quilts, her body aching but finally warm. The steady drumming of rain against the window and the distant rumble of thunder created a strangely comforting backdrop to her thoughts. She had lost everything again. First her parents to influenza last winter. Now all her worldly possessions to the flood. All that remained of her planned future was a piece of land she might not be able to claim without the deed. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Self-pity would solve nothing. If she had learned anything in her 22 years, it was that survival required resilience. Tomorrow, she would begin figuring out her next steps. Tonight, she would be grateful she had survived to face those challenges. And she would be grateful to the blue-eyed cowboy who had appeared like a vision through the rain to snatch her from the jaws of death. Hannah woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, disorientation gripped her as she stared at the rough-hewn ceiling beams above. Then memory flooded back: the storm, the broken wagon, the raging waters that had nearly claimed her life, and the cowboy who had saved her. She sat up cautiously, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. Every part of her body protested the movement, but nothing seemed seriously injured. The clock on the bedside table showed it was nearly 9 in the morning. She had slept through the night and well into the day. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Wilkins' entrance. The housekeeper carried a tray with steaming coffee, eggs, and biscuits. "Good morning, dear." "How are you feeling today?" "Sore," Hannah admitted, "but much better. Thank you for taking care of me." Mrs. Wilkins set the tray across Hannah's lap. "Eat up now, and I've laid out some clothes for you there on the chair. They belonged to Sam's sister before she married and moved to Helena. Should fit well enough until we can get your own things replaced." Hannah glanced at the simple calico dress. "That's very kind, but I have no way to repay such generosity. I lost everything in the flood." The older woman waved away her concerns. "Folks help each other out here. It's the only way to survive in Montana territory." She moved to the window and pulled back the curtains fully. Storms passed. Sun's out bright as can be, like it never rained a drop. That's spring for you in these parts, fickle as a yearling colt. Hannah sipped the strong coffee gratefully. "Is Mr. Blackburn around? I should thank him properly." "He rode out at dawn to look for your horses and anything that might have washed up from your wagon." Mrs. Wilkins straightened the already neat room as she spoke. "That boy never could sit still when there was work to be done. Just like his father." After breakfast, Hannah dressed in the borrowed clothes, grateful they were only slightly too large. She brushed her hair with a borrowed brush, lamenting the loss of her personal items but thankful to be alive to miss them. Making her way downstairs, she found the main floor of the house surprisingly spacious and well appointed. Comfortable furniture, polished wood floors partially covered with woven rugs, and bookshelves filled with volumes suggested that the Blackburn ranch was prosperous. Mrs. Wilkins appeared from the kitchen. "Ah, you're up and about. Feel steady enough for a little tour?" "Yes, thank you. This is a lovely home." The housekeeper beamed with pride. Sam's grandfather built the original cabin and his father expanded it. Sam added the east wing 2 summers ago. She guided Hannah through the dining room to a large kitchen equipped with a modern iron stove. Mr. Blackburn Sr., Sam's father, believed in investing in the best. Said if you're going to build something, build it to last. Hannah ran her hand over the smooth pine table at the center of the kitchen. It seems Mr. Blackburn inherited that philosophy. That and more. Heart as big as Montana, that boy has. Mrs. Wilkins checked something bubbling in a pot on the stove. Though between us, he works too hard. Running this spread alone since his father passed, with just a few hands to help. Ranch this size should have a family. Hannah felt her cheeks warm at the woman's pointed look. "I'm sure he'll find someone suitable when the time is right." Mrs. Wilkins smiled knowingly. "Perhaps he already has." Before Hannah could formulate a response to this surprising insinuation, the front door opened and boots thumped in the entryway. A moment later, Sam appeared in the kitchen doorway, hat in hand. His clothes were mud-spattered, but his face brightened when he saw Hannah. "Miss Foster. Good to see you up and about." "Thanks to you, Mr. Blackburn." She hesitated, then added, "I can never repay what you did." He shook his head dismissively. "Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't. You did." Hannah met his gaze steadily. "Thank you." Something passed between them in that moment, a current of understanding as powerful in its way as the flood that had brought them together. Sam broke the connection first, clearing his throat and turning to hang his hat on a peg by the door. "I found one of your horses about 3 miles downstream," he said. "Chestnut mare with a white blaze." "That yours?" Hannah's heart leaped. "Penny." "Yes, she's mine. Is she all right?" "Scratched up some, but walking fine. Got her settled in the barn." He poured himself coffee from the pot on the stove. "No sign of the other horse or much from your wagon. River's still running high. Might find more once it recedes." "What about my trunk?" Hannah asked, hope tinging her voice. "It's large, made of oak with iron bands." "It had all my important papers." Sam shook his head regretfully. "Nothing like that yet, but I've got Jeb and Lewis riding the creek banks. If it washed up somewhere, they'll find it." Hannah nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Without the deed to her land, her future in Bozeman looked increasingly uncertain. "Now, Miss Foster," Sam continued, "I've been thinking. Bozeman's a good 4-day ride from here in good weather. With the roads washed out like they are, could be a week or more before travel's safe." "I couldn't possibly impose on you for that long," Hannah protested. "It's no imposition. We've got plenty of room, and Mrs. Wilkins here complains I don't give her enough people to cook for." He smiled at the housekeeper, who huffed but didn't contradict him. "Besides, gives us more time to try recovering your belongings." Mrs. Wilkins nodded approvingly. "It's settled then. Miss Foster stays until the road's clear." She turned to the stove. "Now both of you wash up. Lunch will be ready in 20 minutes. As the housekeeper bustled about her domain, Sam led Hannah to the front porch. The air was fresh and clean after the storm, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. From this elevation, Hannah could see for miles across rolling grasslands to the mountains beyond. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "Most beautiful country in the world," Sam agreed, leaning against a porch post. "Your land in Bozeman, is it ranch land?" Hannah shook her head. My father bought a building in town before he died. He and my mother were planning to open a mercantile. She swallowed hard. That was their dream, to build something of their own in the West. After they passed, I decided to carry on for them. That takes courage, Sam observed, coming all this way alone. Or foolishness, Hannah replied with a wry smile, as yesterday clearly demonstrated. Sam studied her for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. Difference between courage and foolishness is often just how things turn out in the end. Story's not finished yet, Miss Foster. The simple wisdom in his words touched Hannah deeply. Please, she said impulsively, call me Hannah. His smile warmed his entire face. Hannah, he repeated as if testing the sound of it, and I'm Sam. Mr. Blackburn makes me look around for my father. In that moment, with the sun warming her face and Sam's steady presence beside her, Hannah felt something she hadn't experienced since her parents' deaths, a tentative hope for the future, whatever it might hold. The days that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, Sam rode out with his men to check the receding floodwaters for any sign of Hannah's belongings. Each evening, he returned with disappointing news but unflagging determination to try again the next day. Hannah, unwilling to be idle, inserted herself into the household routine. Mrs. Wilkins initially protested that a guest shouldn't work, but soon relented when it became clear that Hannah was both capable and determined to earn her keep. Never seen hands so soft take to ranch work so quick, the housekeeper commented one afternoon as Hannah helped knead bread dough. City girl like you should be fumbling about, but you've got a knack for it. I'm hardly a city girl, Hannah replied. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. My father ran the general store and my mother and I helped. Mrs. Wilkins nodded approvingly. Shopkeeper's daughter. That explains it. Retail folk know about hard work. On the fourth day after her rescue, Hannah ventured to the barn to visit Penny. The chestnut mare nickered with recognition as Hannah approached her stall. Hello, old friend, Hannah murmured, stroking the horse's velvety nose. At least we still have each other. She's a fine animal, came Sam's voice from behind her. Spirited but gentle, like her owner. Hannah turned to find him leaning against a post, watching her with those penetrating blue eyes that seemed to see more than she intended to reveal. I've been meaning to ask, she said. Did you find any sign of my other horse, the gelding? Sam's expression sobered. I'm sorry, Hannah. We found him yesterday downstream. He didn't make it. The news hit her harder than expected. The sturdy brown gelding had been her father's horse, one of the few connections to her past that had survived the journey west. I see, she managed, blinking back sudden tears. Sam stepped closer, his presence solid and reassuring. I had the boys bury him proper on the hillside where the wildflowers grow. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. Thank you, Sam, that was kind, he shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. Least I could do. He cleared his throat. Actually came to tell you I'm riding into town tomorrow for supplies. Thought you might want to come along, speak to the land office about your situation. Hannah's spirits lifted immediately. Yes, I'd like that very much. Good. He hesitated, then added, town's a full day's ride. We'd need to start at dawn, stay overnight, and return the following day. Mrs. Wilkins will pack us provisions. That sounds fine. The prospect of action, of taking steps toward resolving her situation, energized Hannah. I'll be ready at dawn. Wear trousers if Mrs. Wilkins can find you some, Sam advised. Safer for the long ride, especially with parts of the trail still washed out. Hannah raised an eyebrow. Mr. Blackburn, are you suggesting I dress improperly? A slow smile spread across his face. I'm suggesting you dress practically, Miss Foster. Out here, survival trumps propriety every time. "Well then," she replied with mock seriousness, "in the interest of survival, I accept your scandalous suggestion." His laugh, rich and genuine, echoed through the barn rafters, startling a nesting swallow into flight. Hannah found herself laughing too, the sound unfamiliar to her ears after months of grief and struggle. In that moment of shared mirth, something shifted between them, a subtle change, like spring thawing the edges of a frozen stream. Neither acknowledged it directly, but as Sam helped her groom Penny, their conversation flowed more easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that required no filling. The following morning dawned clear and cool, with a hint of warmth promising a fine day ahead. Hannah, dressed in borrowed trousers, boots, and a flannel shirt beneath her own jacket, waited on the porch as Sam saddled their horses. Mrs. Wilkins emerged from the house with a bundle of food and a stern expression. "Now you mind the weather, Samuel Blackburn. Spring storms can blow in without warning in these parts." "Yes, madam," Sam replied with the patient tone of a man accustomed to such admonishments. The housekeeper turned her attention to Hannah. "And you, Miss Foster, don't let this one talk you into any foolishness. He may be the most respected rancher in the county, but he's still got more daring than sense sometimes." Hannah smiled reassuringly. "I'll keep him in line, Mrs. Wilkins." Sam approached, leading both horses. "Ready." Hannah nodded, suddenly aware of the intimacy this journey would entail. 2 days alone with this man who had already come to occupy so much of her thoughts. She pushed aside the flutter of nervousness in her stomach and allowed Sam to help her mount. As they rode away from the ranch, the rising sun at their backs cast long shadows ahead of them. Hannah glanced at Sam's profile, strong and sure against the golden light, and felt a curious sensation of rightness, as if despite all the chaos and loss that had brought her to this moment, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The trail to town wound through rolling hills and stands of ponderosa pine, occasionally following the same creek that had nearly claimed Hannah's life. The water had receded considerably, though evidence of its fury remained in debris caught in branches and gouges carved in the earth. "Hard to believe this little stream caused so much damage," Hannah remarked as they forded a shallow section. "That's Montana for you," Sam replied. "Everything's peaceful until suddenly it isn't. The land demands respect." "Like its people," Hannah observed. Sam glanced at her with appreciation. "Exactly like its people. You're catching on quick." They rode steadily through the morning, stopping briefly at midday to rest the horses and eat some of Mrs. Wilkins' provisions. Sam spread his coat on a sun-warmed boulder for Hannah to sit on, a gesture of frontier gallantry that made her smile. "Tell me about your parents," he said as they shared bread, cheese, and dried apples. "What were they like?" The question surprised Hannah. Few people had asked about her parents since their deaths, as if the topic were too painful to broach. "My father was the most honest man I've ever known," she began slowly. "He believed that a person's word was sacred. My mother was different, practical to her bones, but with an unexpected romantic streak. She loved poetry and could recite Tennyson by heart." "Sounds like a good match." They were. Hannah smiled at the memory. They balanced each other. When father would get carried away with some new business idea, mother would bring him back to earth. When mother worried too much about practical matters, father reminded her to see the beauty in life. She paused, swallowing hard. They were married 25 years when the influenza took them, just 3 days apart. Sam was quiet for a moment, respecting her grief. "My mother died when I was 12, he finally said. "Fever. My father raised me and my sister alone after that. Never remarried, though plenty tried to catch his eye. You must miss him. Every day." Sam tossed an apple core into the underbrush. He taught me everything I know about ranching, about being a man. He'd have liked you, I think." The simple compliment warmed Hannah more than it should have. "What was he like?" "Stubborn as a Missouri mule," Sam chuckled. "But fair, always fair, treated his workers like family. Built the ranch from nearly nothing, just a small herd and a lot of determination." "Like father, like son," Hannah observed. Sam ducked his head, embarrassed by the comparison. "I've still got a lot to prove before I measure up to him." They continued their journey after lunch, the conversation flowing easily between them. Sam pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, his deep knowledge of the land evident in every observation. Hannah found herself drawn not just to his handsome face and kind eyes, but to the passion with which he spoke of his home. By late afternoon, they crested a rise, and a small settlement came into view in the valley below. Unlike the bustling Bozeman that Hannah had heard described, this was a modest frontier town with a single main street lined with wooden buildings. "Welcome to Elk Creek," Sam announced. "Not much to look at, but it's the closest town to my ranch. We've got a general store, land office, saloon, church, and even a hotel that doesn't have too many bed bugs." "Sounds luxurious," Hannah replied with a laugh. "For Montana territory, it is." Sam urged his horse forward. "Come on. We'll get rooms at the hotel, then see if the land office is still open." They rode down the muddy main street, attracting curious glances from the few people abroad in the late afternoon. Sam nodded greetings to several, his status in the community evident from the respectful responses. The Elk Creek Hotel proved to be a 2-story wooden structure with peeling paint but clean windows. Sam helped Hannah dismount, then tied their horses to the hitching post. "Wait here," he instructed. "I'll make sure they have rooms available." Hannah watched him enter the hotel, struck by how natural it felt to be traveling with him after knowing him less than a week. There was an ease between them that defied explanation, as if they had known each other far longer. Sam emerged a few minutes later with a relieved expression. "Got the last 2 rooms. Spring cattle drives brought extra hands to town." They secured their horses at the nearby livery, then made their way to the land office, a small building next to the general store. Unfortunately, they found it closed for the day. "We'll come back first thing tomorrow," Sam promised, noting Hannah's disappointed expression. "Meanwhile, let's get some dinner. The hotel dining room is decent, or there's the saloon if you're feeling adventurous." "The hotel will be fine," Hannah decided, suddenly conscious of her borrowed men's clothing and wind-blown appearance. "Though I hardly look presentable." Sam's eyes traveled over her in a way that made her pulse quicken. "You look just fine to me." The hotel dining room was half full, mainly with cattle buyers and ranch hands in town for business. Their entrance caused a momentary lull in conversation as curious eyes assessed the newcomers. Sam guided Hannah to a corner table with a protective hand at the small of her back. A round-faced waitress approached with a friendly smile. "Sam Blackburn, haven't seen you in town for an age. Who's your friend?" "Evening, Betsy. This is Miss Hannah Foster, Hannah Betsy Miller. She knows everything about everyone for 20 miles. Betsy laughed good-naturedly. "Someone's got to keep track of you all. What'll you have?" "Cook's made beef stew tonight, and it ain't half bad." They ordered the stew and coffee. As they waited, Hannah noticed a distinguished-looking older man at a nearby table watching them with interest. Sam followed her gaze. "That's Judge Wilson. He runs the land office and serves as circuit judge for the county." As if the mention of his name had been an invitation, the judge rose and approached their table. "Sam Blackburn, as I live and breathe. About time you showed your face in town." Sam stood to shake the man's hand. "Judge, good to see you. Allow me to introduce Miss Hannah Foster." The judge bowed slightly. "A pleasure, Miss Foster. We don't get many new faces in Elk Creek, especially one so pleasant to look upon." Hannah acknowledged the compliment with a nod. "Thank you, sir. We were hoping to speak with you tomorrow, actually. I have a matter regarding a land deed in Bozeman." "Ah," the judge said, his expression turning professional. "Well, I'll be in the office from 8 until noon. Stop by and we'll see what we can do." He glanced between them with undisguised curiosity. "If you don't mind my asking, how do you two know each other?" Sam answered before Hannah could. "Miss Foster's wagon broke up in Barnes Creek during the flash flood last week. I happened to be riding by and helped her out." "Helped her out?" Hannah interjected with a raised eyebrow. "You roped me like a stray calf and pulled me from the water. I'd have drowned otherwise." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "That's so. Well, Sam always did have good timing and a steady hand with a rope." He nodded approvingly. "I'll see you both tomorrow, then." After he departed, Betsy brought their meals, and they ate with the appetite of travelers who had ridden all day. The stew was indeed not half bad, hearty and filling, if somewhat lacking in seasoning. As they finished their coffee, the dining room began to empty, the ranch hands moving toward the saloon for evening entertainment. "Would you like to walk a bit before turning in?" Sam suggested. "It's a fine evening and you might like to see the town." Hannah agreed readily, not yet prepared to end their time together. They strolled down the main street, Sam pointing out buildings of interest and sharing bits of local history. The western sky blazed with sunset colors, painting the humble frontier town in gold and crimson. "It's smaller than I expected," Hannah admitted. "Even smaller than where I grew up." "Elk Creek's young yet," Sam replied. 10 years ago there was nothing here but a trading post. In another 10, who knows, could be as big as Bozeman." They paused at the end of the street where civilization gave way to open prairie. The first stars had appeared in the eastern sky, brilliant pinpoints against deepening blue. "You ever think of leaving?" Hannah asked suddenly. "Going somewhere bigger? Back east, perhaps?" Sam shook his head without hesitation. "This is home. My father's bones are in this soil, and someday mine will be too." He looked down at her, expression serious in the fading light. "What about you? Still set on Bozeman?" The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Hannah considered carefully before answering. "I came west because it was my parents' dream. I wanted to honor that." She gazed out at the vast landscape, feeling its pull. "But now I'm starting to think I might be finding dreams of my own out here." Sam didn't respond immediately, but his hand found hers in the gathering dusk. His fingers were rough from ranch work, but his touch was gentle as he interlaced them with hers. They stood that way for several moments, connected by that simple contact, neither speaking nor needing to. Around them, Elk Creek settled into evening rhythms. Piano music drifted from the saloon. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere a child called good night. Finally, Sam squeezed her hand lightly. "We should get some rest. Morning comes early." They walked back to the hotel in companionable silence, still hand in hand. In the small lobby they paused at the foot of the stairs that led to their separate rooms. "Thank you for bringing me here," Hannah said softly. "For everything, really. My pleasure." Sam's voice was equally soft, his eyes intent on hers. "Good night, Hannah." "Good night, Sam." For a heartbeat, Hannah thought he might kiss her. She found herself hoping he would. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles before releasing her. As Hannah climbed the stairs to her room, her hand still tingling from his touch, she realized with sudden clarity that somewhere between the floodwaters and this quiet frontier town, she had begun to fall in love with Samuel Blackburn. The revelation should have frightened her. It was too soon, too sudden, too uncertain, but instead, it filled her with a strange, peaceful certainty, as if she had finally recognized something that had been true all along. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through thin curtains. Hannah dressed carefully in the same borrowed clothes, smoothing her hair as best she could without her combs and pins. The face that looked back at her from the small mirror above the washstand seemed different, somehow more alive, with color in her cheeks that hadn't been there before. Sam was waiting in the hotel dining room, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He rose when she entered, his eyes warming at the sight of her. "Sleep well?" he asked as he held her chair. "Better than I expected," Hannah replied. In truth, she had lain awake for hours, her mind filled with thoughts of him and the uncertain future that lay ahead. They breakfasted quickly on eggs and biscuits, then walked to the land office where Judge Wilson was already at his desk, reading through a stack of papers. "Ah, Miss Foster, Mr. Blackburn, right on time." The judge gestured to chairs across from him. "Now, what's this about a land deed in Bozeman?" Hannah explained her situation, her parents' purchase of property, their deaths, and her journey west to claim her inheritance, culminating in the loss of all her documentation in the flood. The judge listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. A difficult situation, to be sure. Without the deed or supporting papers, establishing your claim could be challenging. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully against his desk. However, land transactions are recorded in county records. If your father purchased the property legally, there should be documentation in Bozeman. Hope blossomed in Hannah's chest. "So there's a chance I can still claim my land." "More than a chance, my dear. A likelihood." The judge pulled a sheet of paper toward him and began writing. "I'll draft a letter to the Bozeman Land Office explaining the circumstances. With your parents' names and approximate date of purchase, they should be able to locate the records." "Thomas and Margaret Foster," Hannah supplied eagerly. "They bought the property last June, a building on Main Street." Judge Wilson nodded as he wrote. "And your identity can be established through—" Hannah's face fell. "My identification papers were in my trunk. I have nothing to prove who I am." "I can vouch for her," Sam interjected. "And Mrs. Wilkins has been caring for her this past week. Surely our word counts for something." The judge looked at Sam with amused respect. "Your word carries considerable weight in this county, Sam, as does your father's legacy." He finished writing with a flourish. "I believe this will suffice. Take it to the land office in Bozeman, and they should be able to help you, Miss Foster." Hannah accepted the letter with heartfelt thanks, relief washing over her. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope, a path forward where before there had been none. As they left the land office, Sam suggested they visit the general store before starting back to the ranch. "Mrs. Wilkins will have my hide if I don't bring back her coffee and sugar." The store was a treasure trove of goods, from practical necessities to small luxuries. While Sam selected items from the housekeeper's list, Hannah wandered the aisles, fingering fabrics and examining household items with wistful appreciation. "See something you like?" Sam asked, joining her by a display of combs and hairpins. Hannah quickly dropped her hand from a tortoiseshell comb she had been admiring. "Just looking." Sam studied her for a moment, then turned to the storekeeper. "We'll take that comb and a hairbrush too, and some of those hairpins." "Sam, no," Hannah protested. "I can't let you do that." "Consider it replacing what was lost," he said firmly. "Besides, my sister left plenty of dresses but not many personal items." Before Hannah could argue further, he had paid for the purchases and handed her the small paper-wrapped package. "Thank you," she said softly. "That's very thoughtful." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Practical, that's all. Can't have you losing that pretty hair to tangles." The compliment brought warmth to her cheeks. To cover her reaction, Hannah moved toward another display, this one featuring books. Her fingers trailed along the spines of several volumes before stopping at a familiar title. Tennyson, she murmured, picking up the slim volume. My mother's favorite. Sam watched her face closely. Add it to the pile. This time, Hannah didn't protest. The book would be a connection to her mother, a small piece of home in this new land. With their purchases complete, they collected their horses from the livery and began the journey back to the ranch. The day was perfect for traveling, clear skies, mild temperature, and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of pine and sage. They rode at an easy pace, talking sometimes, comfortable in silence at others. Hannah found herself studying Sam when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, the way sunlight caught in his sandy hair, the capable hands that held the reins so confidently. When they stopped to water the horses at a small stream, Sam helped Hannah dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. That letter from Judge Wilson, he said as they led the horses to drink. It may take some time to sort out your claim in Bozeman. Yes, Hannah agreed, uncertain where he was leading with this observation. What I mean is, Sam continued, suddenly looking boyishly nervous, you're welcome to stay at the ranch as long as needed, no rush to leave. Hannah studied his face, reading more in his expression than his casual words suggested. That's very generous. Not generous at all, he admitted, taking a step closer to her. Truth is, I've gotten used to having you around. Mrs. Wilkins has too. Is that so? Hannah's heart quickened at his proximity. More than used to it. Sam reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather light. I find myself dreading the day you'll leave. The directness of his admission took her breath away. Sam, I know it's fast, he interrupted, words tumbling out now. We barely know each other. But sometimes out here, life moves differently. Time means something else when you've faced death together. Hannah nodded, understanding perfectly what he was trying to express. Like the difference between courage and foolishness. Exactly. His smile was relieved, grateful for her comprehension. I don't know what's happening between us, Hannah. I just know I want to find out. In answer, Hannah took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, she raised herself on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question asked and answered in the same breath. Then Sam's arms came around her, pulling her against him as the kiss deepened into something more urgent, more certain. When they finally parted, Hannah remained in the circle of his arms, her head resting against his chest where she could hear the steady, rapid beating of his heart. Well, Sam said after a moment, his voice rough with emotion, I guess that settles that. Hannah laughed softly. I suppose it does. They rode the rest of the way home with lighter hearts, the future still uncertain but now filled with possibilities neither had imagined a week earlier. As the ranch came into view in the late afternoon light, Hannah saw it with new eyes, not just as a temporary shelter, but as a place that could, perhaps, become home. Mrs. Wilkins greeted them at the door, her shrewd gaze taking in their bright eyes and barely suppressed smiles. About time you two figured things out, she said cryptically, accepting the package of coffee and sugar from Sam. Dinner's nearly ready. Go get washed up. Over a hearty meal of roast beef and potatoes, they shared news of their journey and the promising letter from Judge Wilson. Mrs. Wilkins listened with satisfaction, nodding approvingly. So you'll be staying with us a while longer, she observed, looking at Hannah. If that's all right, Hannah replied. The housekeeper snorted. More than all right. This place could use a woman's touch besides mine. She shot a meaningful glance at Sam. And someone to keep this one from working himself into an early grave like his father did. After dinner, Sam suggested a walk to check on Penny. The evening was mild, with a full moon rising over the eastern ridges, casting silver light across the ranch yard. In the barn, the mare greeted Hannah with a soft nicker of recognition. As Hannah stroked her neck, Sam leaned against the stall door, watching them with undisguised affection. "She's healing well," he observed. "Another week she'll be good as new." "Thanks to your care," Hannah said. "You have a gift with animals. Horses are simple compared to people. They say what they mean and mean what they say." He moved closer, slipping an arm around her waist. "Unlike some folks who say they're just looking at a comb they've been wanting for 5 minutes." Hannah laughed, leaning into him. "I didn't want to presume on your generosity. You've already done so much, Hannah." Sam turned her to face him, his expression serious in the lantern light. "I want to do so much more if you'll let me." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Sam, what exactly are you saying?" He took a breath. "I'm saying I know it's been less than 2 weeks since you nearly drowned in Barnes Creek. I know we've barely scratched the surface of knowing each other. I know the sensible thing would be to wait to be sure. But," Hannah prompted, heart racing, "but I've never been particularly sensible." His smile was self-deprecating. "And I'm already sure of what I feel for you." Hannah reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "What do you feel?" "That saving you that day was the best thing I've ever done. That having you here feels right in a way nothing else has since my father died. That when I think about you going to Bozeman, it feels like losing part of myself." He turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. "I think that's what love is, or the beginning of it." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming emotion. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I've tried to tell myself it's too soon, that it doesn't make sense, but heart has its reasons that reason knows nothing of," Sam finished, quoting the line from somewhere she couldn't place. "Yes, exactly that." Hannah smiled through her tears. "When did a Montana rancher get so philosophical?" "My mother's books," he admitted. "I read them all after she died, trying to find her in the pages." He brushed away a tear that had escaped down Hannah's cheek. "What I'm trying to say, badly, is that I want you to stay. Not just until we sort out your land claim. For good." The words hung between them, momentous and fragile. Hannah knew that her answer would change the course of her life irrevocably. "What about my parents' dream?" she asked softly. "The store in Bozeman." "Dreams can change," Sam said. "Or grow to include more than we first imagined." He took her hands in his. "We could still open that store if that's what you want, or find other ways to honor their memory." Hannah considered his words, feeling the truth in them. Her parents had wanted her to find happiness and purpose in the West. Perhaps this was the form that happiness was meant to take, different from what they had envisioned, but no less meaningful. "Ask me properly," she said finally, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. Understanding dawned in Sam's eyes. Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee on the barn's dirt floor, still holding her hands in his. "Hannah Foster," he said, his voice strong and certain, "I know this is fast and may be foolish, but my heart is sure. Will you marry me? Will you make this ranch your home, and me the happiest man in Montana territory?" Hannah looked down at this man who had saved her life in more ways than one, and all doubt vanished like morning mist before the sun. "Yes," she answered simply. "Yes to all of it." Sam rose and pulled her into his arms, his kiss filled with promise and joy. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing, giddy with the enormity of the step they had just taken. "Mrs. Wilkins is going to say she knew it all along," Hannah predicted. "She probably did," Sam agreed. "Nothing gets past that woman." They walked back to the house hand in hand. the moonlight illuminating their path and the future stretching before them like the vast Montana sky wide open and full of possibility. As expected, Mrs. Wilkins received their news with a satisfied nod, and only the briefest flash of surprise that they had come to their senses so quickly. "Well, it's about time," she declared. "Though I didn't expect you to be quite this efficient about it, Samuel." Sam laughed, his arm around Hannah's waist. "When you know, Mrs. Wilkins, so they say." The housekeeper tried to maintain her practical demeanor, but her eyes were suspiciously bright. "Your father would approve, Sam. She's got spirit, this one." In the days that followed, news of their engagement spread quickly through the county. Neighbors rode for miles to meet the woman who had captured Sam Blackburn's heart, each bringing gifts and well wishes for the couple. Hannah found herself welcomed into the ranching community with open arms, her Eastern background a source of interest rather than exclusion. The women especially were eager to help her adjust to ranch life, sharing recipes, household tips, and friendly advice about managing a husband and a home in the demanding Montana environment. Through it all, Hannah's thoughts occasionally turned to her land in Bozeman. 2 weeks after their return from Elk Creek, she and Sam made the longer journey to Bozeman with Judge Wilson's letter. To Hannah's relief, the land office quickly located records of her father's purchase. "Property's still there, madam," the clerk informed her after verifying her identity through a series of questions about her parents and their backgrounds. "Building's sound, though it's been sitting empty this past year." With the deed reissued and securely in her possession, Hannah faced a decision. Standing on Bozeman's busy Main Street, looking at the sturdy brick building that had been her parents' final investment, she felt torn between the past and the future. "We could sell it," Sam suggested, watching her face closely. "Or keep it and lease it out to a business." Hannah walked to the large front window, peering into the dusty interior. The space was well designed for a store, with ample display area and storage rooms visible at the back. "Or," she said slowly, an idea forming, "we could use it ourselves." Sam raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "A supply depot," Hannah explained, her excitement growing. "For the ranch. We could bring cattle to market here, buy supplies at better prices than in Elk Creek, maybe even expand to selling goods from other ranches in the area." Sam considered the idea, nodding thoughtfully. "A rancher's cooperative of sorts. It has merit." He smiled at her enthusiasm. "You really are a shopkeeper's daughter, aren't you?" "It's in my blood," Hannah admitted. "This way, we honor my parents' dream while building something that supports our life together." Sam pulled her into an embrace, right there on Bozeman's Main Street, heedless of curious onlookers. "You're remarkable. You know that." Their wedding took place that autumn, after the cattle drive and before the winter snows. The small church in Elk Creek overflowed with well-wishers, ranch hands, neighbors, and even Judge Wilson, who had taken a special interest in their unusual courtship. Hannah wore a dress of ivory satin ordered all the way from Denver, with her mother's lace veil that Mrs. Wilkins had miraculously managed to repair after finding it waterlogged but intact downstream from the flood site. "Something of your past to carry into your future," the housekeeper had said, presenting the restored veil with uncharacteristic sentimentality. As Hannah stood before the altar with Sam, his blue eyes never leaving hers as they spoke their vows, she felt the presence of her parents strongly, not as a sorrowful absence, but as a blessing, a continuity between what had been and what would be. Their life together unfolded with the rhythms of the ranch, calving seasons and cattle drives, summer droughts and winter blizzards. The supply depot in Bozeman flourished under Hannah's management, eventually expanding to include a proper general store that served both the ranching community and the growing town. Mrs. Wilkins remained with them, though she insisted on moving to a small cabin Sam built for her when Hannah discovered she was expecting their first child the following spring. "Young family needs privacy," the housekeeper declared firmly. "I'll be close enough to help with the baby, but not so close I hear every whispered sweet nothing." Their son, Thomas Samuel Blackburn, arrived on a perfect May morning, with wildflowers carpeting the hillsides and new calves dotting the pastures. Hannah labored through the night with Mrs. Wilkins and the local midwife attending, Sam pacing the porch until his son's first cry rang through the dawn air. When Hannah placed the tiny bundle in his arms, Sam looked at his son with wonder and at his wife with profound gratitude. "He has your eyes," Hannah observed, watching Sam rock the infant with surprising skill. "And your determination," Sam countered. "Did you hear those lungs? Arguing his case from the very beginning." The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Sam's knowledge of cattle and land combined with Hannah's head for business proved a formidable partnership. They gradually expanded their holdings, buying adjacent properties when they became available and implementing innovative ranching practices Sam had read about in agricultural journals. 2 years after Thomas's birth, they welcomed a daughter, Margaret Rose, named for both their mothers. Their family felt complete, balanced like the partnership they had built together. On the 5th anniversary of Hannah's near drowning in Barnes Creek, Sam surprised her with a picnic on the hillside overlooking the spot where he had pulled her from the water. "Seems fitting to remember the day that changed everything," he said, as he spread a blanket beneath a towering pine. The children played nearby, supervised by an ever-vigilant Mrs. Wilkins, while Sam and Hannah enjoyed a rare moment alone. Hannah leaned against her husband's shoulder, watching the creek flow peacefully below, so different from the raging torrent that had nearly claimed her life. "Do you ever think about how easily we might have missed each other?" she asked. "If I had left a day earlier or later, if you hadn't decided to check the creek that day." Sam's arm tightened around her. "I try not to think about it. Makes my blood run cold, imagining you in those waters with no one to throw a rope." Hannah turned to look at him, this man who had become the center of her world. "Do you remember what you told me that day on your porch about courage and foolishness? That the difference is often just how things turn out in the end," Sam recalled with a smile. "I think about that sometimes," Hannah said softly. "How what seemed like the most foolish decision of my life, traveling alone across the country, turned out to be the most courageous thing I could have done, because it led me to you." Sam kissed her then, with all the tenderness and passion that had only deepened over their years together. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the crisp autumn air. "I thank God every day for that broken wagon," he murmured, "and for the woman stubborn enough to try crossing a rising creek." Hannah laughed, the sound echoing across the valley that had become her home. "And I thank him for the cowboy who knew how to throw a rope." They remained on the hillside until sunset, watching their children play, talking of plans for the ranch and the store, and simply enjoying the rare luxury of uninterrupted time together. As the sky blazed with color and the first stars appeared, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had come west seeking her parents' dream and found her own instead, a love born in floodwaters, a family built on shared purpose, and a home as vast and beautiful as the Montana sky above them. As they gathered their children and picnic basket to return to the ranch house, Hannah took one last look at the creek below. What had once been a place of terror now seemed merely another piece of the landscape she loved, its waters flowing on just as life did, sometimes peaceful, sometimes turbulent, but always, always moving forward. Sam took her hand, his touch as familiar and essential to her now as her own heartbeat. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Hannah nodded, her heart full beyond measure. "I already am." 10 years to the day after Hannah's wagon broke apart in the flash flood, the Blackburn Ranch hosted a celebration. Friends and neighbors gathered from miles around to mark the anniversary of what everyone now referred to as the fortuitous disaster. The ranch had grown considerably in the decade since Sam had pulled Hannah from the floodwaters. The original house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, which now included a third child, 8-year-old James, named for Sam's father. The barn had been rebuilt twice as large, and new bunkhouses stood nearby for the increased number of ranch hands needed to manage their expanded cattle operation. In Bozeman, the Blackburn Mercantile had become an institution, managed now by a capable couple who had come west from Pennsylvania at Hannah's invitation. The business served as the centerpiece for a thriving ranchers' cooperative that connected Montana beef with markets as far away as Chicago. As twilight descended on the celebration, lanterns were lit around the ranch yard, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Children darted between adults, playing elaborate games of tag and hide and seek. A fiddle player struck up a lively tune, and impromptu dancing began on a wooden platform Sam's men had constructed for the occasion. Hannah stood on the porch, watching her husband swing their daughter in a circle to the music's rhythm. Thomas, now a thoughtful 10-year-old with his father's blue eyes and his mother's serious demeanor, sat nearby deep in conversation with Judge Wilson, who had become a regular visitor to the ranch and something of a grandfather figure to the children. Mrs. Wilkins appeared at Hannah's side, offering a cup of coffee. Though her hair had gone completely white and she walked with a slight stoop now, her eyes remained as sharp as ever. "Quite a life you've built here," the housekeeper observed, following Hannah's gaze across the festivities. "We built," Hannah corrected gently. "You've been part of it from the beginning." Mrs. Wilkins acknowledged this with a small nod. "Never thought I'd see Sam settled so happy. After his father passed, I worried he'd work himself into the ground trying to prove something." "He still works too hard," Hannah said with a fond smile, "but he's found balance. Because of you," Mrs. Wilkins stated matter-of-factly. "You gave him more to live for than just the ranch." Before Hannah could respond, Sam appeared before them, slightly out of breath from dancing. His hair had begun to show threads of silver at the temples, and lines had deepened around his eyes, but he moved with the same easy confidence she had first noticed a decade ago. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Blackburn?" he asked, extending his hand with exaggerated formality. "I don't know," Hannah teased. "I'm being told how indispensable I am. It's quite flattering." "Only the truth," Sam replied. "But Mrs. Wilkins can spare you for one dance, I think." The housekeeper shooed them away. "Go on. I'll keep an eye on young James. He's eyeing the cake something fierce." Sam led Hannah to the dancing area, pulling her into his arms as the fiddle player transitioned to a slower tune. Other couples joined them, but they hardly noticed, lost in their own private celebration. "Happy anniversary," Sam murmured against her ear. 10 years since I fished the most beautiful catch of my life out of Barnes Creek." Hannah laughed softly. "Is that how you're describing it now? I seem to recall being compared to a stray calf, not a fish." "I'm refining the story as I age," Sam admitted with a grin. "By our 50th anniversary, I'll probably be claiming I dove in after you like some dime novel hero." "As long as the ending stays the same," Hannah said, resting her head against his chest as they swayed to the music. "That's the only part that matters." Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Sam and Hannah sat alone on the porch swing, a quilt draped across their laps against the autumn chill. The moon hung low over the eastern ridges, casting the same silver light that had illuminated their first kiss in the barn a decade earlier. "I've been thinking," Sam said, his arm comfortably around Hannah's shoulders. "Always dangerous," she teased. He chuckled, acknowledging the jab. "I'm serious. I've been thinking about expanding again, but differently this time." Hannah shifted to look at him. "What do you have in mind?" "The Wilkins property adjoining our north pasture. Old Jim's asking if we're interested in buying now that he's moving to Oregon to be near his daughter." "More grazing land would be useful," Hannah acknowledged. "But that's not all you're thinking, is it?" Sam shook his head, smiling at how well she knew him. "There's a spot up there on the bluff overlooking Barnes Creek where you can see for miles in every direction. I thought we might build a school." Hannah sat up straighter, surprise and interest animating her face. "A school for the ranch children and others nearby. We're too far from town for daily travel, especially in winter. Thomas is already reading beyond what I can teach him, and Margaret's not far behind." He gestured toward the bunkhouses. "3 of our hands have families now, too. There are enough children within riding distance to justify a proper school." Hannah considered the idea, already calculating costs and logistics in her mind. "We'd need to find a teacher willing to live out here." "I wrote to the education board in Helena last month," Sam admitted. "They have a program for placing teachers in rural areas. Said they could send someone by spring if we have a building ready." "You've been planning this for a while," Hannah observed, not upset by his initiative but curious about his timing. Sam took her hand, his expression turning more serious. "When I pulled you from that creek 10 years ago, I had no idea I was saving a schoolmaster's daughter as well as a shopkeeper's." Hannah's breath caught. She rarely spoke of her mother's work as a teacher before her marriage, a detail she had mentioned to Sam only once, years ago. "You remembered," she whispered. "I remember everything you tell me, Hannah." Sam's voice was rough with emotion. "You've given up so much to build this life with me, your plans for the store, your independence, the life you might have had in a proper town instead of out here in the wilds." "I haven't given up anything," Hannah protested. "I've gained everything that matters." "I know," Sam assured her. "But your mother was an educator. She valued learning. This school, it would be a way to honor her legacy too, not just your father's through the store." Hannah felt tears well in her eyes at the thoughtfulness behind his proposal. After 10 years, this man could still surprise her with his depth of understanding and care. "A school would be wonderful," she agreed, her mind already filling with possibilities. "We could start with the younger children, then perhaps add advanced studies as they grow, maybe even a small library." Sam smiled at her enthusiasm. "So you approve?" "More than approve." Hannah leaned forward to kiss him softly. "I love it, and I love you, Samuel Blackburn." "Even after 10 years of my stubbornness?" he asked with a playful lift of his eyebrow. "Because of your stubbornness," Hannah corrected. "And your courage, your kindness, and your ability to throw a rope with remarkable accuracy." Sam laughed, pulling her closer against the night's growing chill. "Best skill I ever learned." They sat together in contented silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. The ranch slept around them, their children, their workers, their animals, all secure within the boundaries of the life they had built together from the moment a broken wagon and a flash flood had brought them to each other. "You ever regret it?" Sam asked suddenly. "Coming west?" "All that's happened." Hannah considered the question seriously, as she had many times over the years. "I regret losing my parents," she said finally. "I regret not having them here to see their grandchildren, to know you, to see what we've built. But coming west," she shook her head. How could I regret the journey that led me to everything I love? Sam pressed his lips to her temple, and Hannah felt in that simple gesture all the love and partnership they had shared and would continue to share in the years to come. The Blackburn School opened the following spring, a single-room building with large windows and a bell tower, perched on the bluff overlooking Barnes Creek. From its porch, students and teachers alike could see the spot where a wagon had once broken apart in flood waters, where a cowboy had once roped a drowning woman to safety, and where a love story had begun that would shape not just two lives but an entire community for generations to come. And if sometimes, when the spring rains came heavy and fast, Hannah still started at the sound of rushing water, Sam would simply take her hand and hold it tight, a silent reminder that she was safe, she was home, and some broken things were meant to lead to something far more beautiful than anyone could have imagined.